Thank you very much. And I want to tell you that was very nice of you to endorse me in 1992. Got to walk down memory lane a little bit. You had your convention. I don't know how many of you people were there in Canada, but at that time when I ran in 92, I wouldn't take any donations over $100. Don't worry, I've changed that. Running for governor was a little expensive. When I ran for governor, I ran against a woman who's now the head of Hewlett-Packard. She put in $141 million of her own money and raised another $30 million that was reported. I think she even put in some more money kind of getting ready before that. But anyways, $171 million reported. That was kind of hard to beat that with a $100 limit. So I raised $35 million and beat her. So that wasn't bad. But going back to 1992, because I only had a $100 limit, and so I went to the Canadian convention, and all the delegates gave me $100 each. So I put it in a suitcase. I had about $20,000. As I was going across the border, they say you got to report if you have any cash. So I reported. I figured better tell them. And they looked at it, and I had this. I shut my little suitcase and went on to my campaign. It was very important. But thanks, any of you who were there. But it was a little strange carrying a satchel of cash across the border, but it helped. In fact, by the end of the campaign, I'd raised over $5 million in $100 donations. I had an 800 number. I don't know if you remember that. By the way, the 800 number is still working. It's 800-426-1112, and that's the campaign headquarters. I guess I've been in kind of a perpetual campaign. The first time I ran was 1969 for the LA Community College Board. And then the next year I ran for the Secretary of State of California. Then after that, 4 years later, for governor. Then I ran for president. So I don't know how I got started. I have a good hunch, though. My father was running for office all the time, too. He started running the year after I was born for district attorney. He lost. Then 4 years later, he ran again. And he kept running and running. So I guess it got in my genes. But one thing that's extraordinary, usually when you're in office, they get tired of you. So they got tired of me. And I left the governorship in 1982 after 8 years. But I came back 27 years later. And not too many have been able to leave and come back that long. One of the reasons I could come back is I left early. I was only 44 when I left the governorship. I was 36 when I started. I was the youngest governor in the last century to be governor of California, and now I'm the oldest in the 21st, probably the oldest ever. But I'm still around. I still got a little whiles to go here because I'm in good shape. I'm kind of work out fighting the opposition. And the opposition is pretty strong. Boy, things have changed. You know, 27 years ago when I was first governor, there was a little more harmony. You'd actually get a few Republican votes. This time, when last year I tried to close the budget, not just with cuts to programs that are pretty darn important, but also to extend some taxes that were temporary, about $10 billion in taxes. That I had to get, in order to get the votes, you got to have 2/3 votes. That means you need 2 votes in the Assembly from Republicans and 2 votes in the Senate, and then all the other Democrats voting, and that makes 2/3. Well, I cajoled. I took these guys out to dinner. I brought them over to my loft in Sacramento. I bought them good wine. I talked to them. I went to dinner with them. I met their wives. And after 6 months, I struck out. I couldn't get a vote. Just wouldn't vote for it. So I decided this year not to fool around with that, but to go right to the people as we can in California through the initiative. And I got over 1 million signatures to put on the ballot what will be a ballot initiative, Proposition 30, at the November election. And Proposition 30 would raise taxes on joint filers who make $500,000 or more, 1%, and then a little higher, 2%. And then if you make $1 million, you pay 3%. And then we have another one, a 1/4 cent sales tax on all purchases except food. So that's the tax. And what's amazing is just taxing the top 1% will bring in 7 or 8, or it could be as much as $9 billion. Now, people say, you know, I'm picking on them. I'm not picking on them. I just want them to share some of the blessings that they've enjoyed. And if you look at it, I like to kind of compare things. You go back 30 years, and the top 1% in California, and pretty similarly throughout the country, were earning around 8% of the income. They were taking 8%, just 1%. Now it's over 22%. So it's more than doubled in just that short, 3 decades. And the reason for that is through globalization, there are widespread markets, and the amount of money made in these companies, particularly Wall Street financial companies, is in the billions. So the people at the top, or close to the top, they are reaching in to grab part of that billion. And that's why their income is going up. And if you look at the way these issues are framed, and it's usually the guy at the top, and it's not just on Wall Street, you find it in city managers, school superintendents, college presidents. They all say they got to keep raising their salary or they can't recruit. So it's kind of a strange market. If you're at the top, you got to keep giving more and more salaries and benefits. But now if you're just an ordinary working stiff, it's a different deal. Now you're in competition with China and India and Mexico. So your salaries and benefits got to go down, even at the time when the people who are making the decisions, their salaries are going up. The only way to recapture that and rebalance it is to raise the taxes on those that have made the most. So that's what we're doing in California. I think we're the only place where we're asking the people of the state to vote to change the tax code. And we're going to find out soon. We're going to find out soon if the people will vote for that. Now, there's going to be a lot of propaganda on the other side. In fact, I've been noticing the contributions. They put out a letter, and the letter says, will you contribute to the No on 30 campaign based on what you'll save in the first year? Well, obviously, what they'll save in the first year runs into the billions. And I certainly hope they don't respond to that letter. It's kind of a tithing of the 1%. But we're fighting them. We've got support across the board. And we're getting support from working people. We're getting support from environmentalists. And yes, we're getting support from companies themselves. Because believe it or not, some people, you know, whether they're in the liquor industry or the oil industry or the tobacco industry, they would rather tax rich people than tax their industry. So I go to them and I say, look, contribute to our campaign to raise taxes to pay for our schools. That's what it's for, schools and colleges. And who knows, maybe you won't be taxed. And so I'm raising money from all sides. That's what it is. So we're in a big battle here. And it's a battle back in Washington. The Bush tax cuts and all that, they're afraid to call it the way it is. And the way it is there's been a redistribution of wealth from the middle and the bottom up to the top. So they talk about class warfare. It's not class warfare of the masses of people against the few. It's actually the few who are grabbing more and more of the money. And it's because of the way the system is put together now, through the technology, through the globalization, through the tax code, through the whole way of market competition works. And it's a real challenge. And the only way to correct that is to be able to have a political system that responds to the average guy, the average gal out there. And that's going to take a mobilization. And I know you get tired of politicians telling you one thing and then doing something else. And it isn't that good because the money's there and you get into office and you got to listen to those who've got the power. But that shouldn't stop us. We got to build a coalition of ordinary people to restructure the political and economic environment so we don't create mass poverty. We don't hollow out the middle class. Today in California, in America, you got millions of people who've lost their jobs, whose houses are underwater. Millions throughout the country have lost their homes. And the people who profited, they still earn a hell of a lot of money out of that. But where do they pay? You know, nobody's going to jail. No one's giving it back. There's no clawback worthy of the name. And now they're blaming pensions. They're blaming working people. They're blaming project labor agreements. They're blaming prevailing wages. Well, that isn't the problem. The problem is we've had the biggest bank robbery in the history of America. That's called the mortgage meltdown. I mean, what is it when you get somebody to buy a house on credit? You give them a teaser rate so the interest rate looks low. You know, you're in one of these banks or trust companies or mortgage operations, and they believe you. And they get into that house and they think, well, the value will keep going up. They don't know. They're not economists. And then they lend you the money. Then they sell the loan to some sucker somewhere out in the world, and they make a huge profit. And then when the house is underwater, it's worth less than they paid for it. When they're kicked out, then what? They want to cut the safety net. They want to cut Medicaid. They want to cut all the benefits and the structures that make for a strong middle class. And organized labor has been shrinking in the private sector particularly. The public sector, it's a little more vibrant, but now running into a lot of public discontent. I mean, we're in a tough time. You're in a tough time. Anybody who cares about this country is tough because we're borrowing all this damn money. They're afraid ever to tax, and now they're getting ready for some kind of a war over there, another war in the Middle East. They've already spent over $1 trillion, and we got a real problem here. And how are we going to pay for it? We only pay for it by a prosperous economy, by a fair tax system, and by everybody pitching in but having ownership going forward. And that's not what's happening. Schools today, you want to become a lawyer and go to a public college in California, University of California, it costs $50,000. When I went to the University of California, it cost a couple $100s a year. Big difference. And it's squeezing people. College debt now is bigger than credit card debt. It's $1 trillion. Kids are coming out of college with a mortgage on their future, but no house to live in. So we got some big work out there, whether it's protecting your health benefits, whether it's protecting prevailing wage, project labor agreements, building stuff, and you're not going to get a lot of help from the Republicans. I don't want to sound too partisan, but I couldn't get one vote for a decent tax. I couldn't get a vote for the high-speed rail. Not one Republican voted for high-speed rail in the California legislature. Not one. Even though they were for it before, but then when Obama came out for it, they're against it. Because their game plan is anything Obama does is bad, then they can get back in power and do more damage. Also, when you try to get a vote, we had another plan in California. We reduced our prison population by moving less serious inmates to local counties. And that's going to save us about $1 billion a year. Well, not one Republican voted for that. They said blood will run in the streets. Fact is, the crime rate's lower. When I was governor the last time, way back when most of you guys were in high school, at least some of you, some weren't born. Yeah, that's true. The cost of prisons was about 3% of our general fund. Now, it went 2 years ago, it went as high as 11.5%. When you go from 3 to 11 and you got a $100 billion budget, that's really a lot of money. What is that? That's $7.5 billion. That's money that can go to colleges. That's money that can go to training programs. It's a lot of investment. But despite all the issues, we're going to move forward. We're going to build the only high-speed rail in America. We're going to build it in California, and we're going to start by the end of this year. We're going to turn the dirt. By the way, when you're building a high-speed rail, you got to build it in America. You got to build it in California. When you give a tax cut, then people take a trip to Europe, They buy goods from India and China, Japan. But when we invest, whether it's our roads or our bridges, our buses, our trains, alternative energy, we're doing stuff right here. That's why it's so important. Alternative energy, that's another thing. California has a law, which I signed last year, 1/3 of our electricity has to come from renewable energy, solar, geothermal, wind, and efficiency. The last time I was governor, we put in the toughest building standards anywhere in the country. And as a result, Californians per capita use 50% less electricity than the rest of the country. We have efficient buildings, and that means jobs. You got to fix the air conditioning. You got to put in new equipment. You got to keep making it better as the technology improves. And when you fix a building in California, you fix it with someone in the building trades. You fix it with an American, not somebody over in China. It's real simple. By the way, Romney's already talked about rolling back the mileage standards. Why is that? Well, that's so you can buy more oil. And where are you going to buy the oil? From somewhere else. It's coming from Mexico. It's coming from Canada. Or it's coming from, well, you Canadians like to sell that oil. I understand that. But we'd rather use our California sun. It's right here. And use the equipment that captures that sun that will be made in America. That's a real opportunity. So whether it's in transportation, whether it's in prison reform, alternative energy, there's a lot of work. But you have to be committed to it, and then you got to find a way to pay for it. So we got our issues. When you read the Wall Street Journal, they talk about California as some kind of failed state. What they mean is that you have too much participation and impact on California law. You're able to convince me, and we were able to convince the legislature to not support cities that ban project labor agreements. I signed a bill that if you have that kind of a law, you're not going to get money from the state of California. So, yeah, they talk about California as a failed state. Over 50% of the investment in new ideas, new technology, what they call venture capital, is spent in California. It's coming here because we got Silicon Valley, we got San Diego, we have a lot of bright people because of our public universities primarily. And we're attracting, we're building and creating. Not only that, the jobs, not enough by any means, but over the last 12 months, the percentage of new jobs is twice the rate that it is throughout the rest of the country. I think in California we created new jobs about 2.5%. It's about half that nationwide. So it's coming back. Now, we were worse off. We lost over 1 million jobs. 600,000 was in the construction industry. Why was that? Because they sold a lot of homes to people who couldn't afford them with phony mortgages that couldn't be sustained. And then when the you-know-what hit the fan, who paid? The homeowner paid, the worker paid, the whole economy's paid, but the people who cooked up this scheme, who profited from it, are still there for the most part. So what we're facing here is a challenge to retake our country, retake our state by state. Canada shows the way. They didn't have as many people thrown out of homes, not even by a long shot. Why? Because you had better regulation of the banks. And when they say, too much regulation, sometimes, but you can err just as badly by not enough. And when you're playing with banks that have hundreds of billions that are writing financial instruments that nobody can understand, even the people who write them, you're playing Russian roulette with the economy. And when the economy takes a beating, it's the people who pay the price. And that's what this election's all about. I know you got your issues with Obama and his health care ideas. Don't worry. In California, we got your back. It's not going to happen here. We're going to have our exchanges. We'll make sure that you and your benefits get protected. We got to be in this together. It's the countries that's at stake. Yeah, and it's the union movements at stake. You saw what happened in Ohio and Wisconsin. So a lot of people are blaming you. Blame you're become the scapegoat. So I'm going to do the best I can in this election to tell the truth, to let people know that those who have done the best can give some back, 1, 2, or 3%, and can do so in a way that will benefit our schools, our colleges, and yes, balancing our budget so we can do the kind of stuff that we have to do. So it's been a tough time, although when I think back of it, it wasn't so easy back the last time I ran. You know, there's always a problem. My father was running, he had to run against Ronald Reagan. That wasn't so good because Reagan won. 4 years before, he beat Richard Nixon. So sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. The main point is to stick to it. And I've come back not to delay and not to just goof off here. I want to really change the whole fabric here of what our politics is and what it does. Because we got to recapture that spirit where America was for the average guy, that we all had a piece of this country. And that's not true today. You got millions of people who've fallen below any kind of middle class standard. And that doesn't have to be that way. It's all about the political process and recapturing it. We may not win it in 2 or 4 years. It's going to take a while. But as an organization, through solidarity, pulling the individual strengths together to a great collective force, the trade union movement has made a difference in the past. It can make a difference now, and it can make a difference in the future. And I want to be there with you, because we can take back our country, and we start right here in San Diego with this new group of building trades, sheet metal workers, transportation, bus, air, and all the rest of it. Thank you very much.